Hi everyone, welcome to the latest volume of Drawn and Cornered. To celebrate this new season, we've partnered with Aftershock Comics to create a special limited edition variant cover for Undone by Blood or The Other Side of Eden #1 by legendary artist Francesco Francavilla. Check it out. There's only 500 of these covers and you can't buy it. That's right, but you can get it for free and all you have to do is subscribe to this channel and we'll be randomly sending them out to fans just like you. Hi everyone, for a Filthy Lot Entertainment, welcome to Drawn and Cornered. It's the show that corners today's best comic book artists as they draw incredible art while answering fun deep dive questions. After the show, you can bid on the art and all the proceeds will go to our guest's charity of choice. So make sure you watch through to the end to see the final product. In the drawing chair today is Steve Skroce, a comic book and storyboard artist whose list of credits border on the intimidating. His comic book bibliography includes titles at Marvel like The Amazing Spider-Man, X-Men, a character whom he co-created, along with hit creator-owned titles like Maestros and We Stand on Guard with Brian K. Vaughan, both from Image Comics. And we're not done yet. Steve's storyboard credits include frequent collaborations with the Wachowskis on films like V for Vendetta, Speed Racer, and of course the Matrix series. Steve is also a fellow Vancouverite, and with a new creator-owned book on the way, and the knowledge that Steve's working on Matrix 4, we couldn't be more excited to have him in the drawing chair with us today. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Oh, you betcha.
This is exciting. Welcome to season 2 of Drawn and Cornered. I'm so happy that you're our guest today. Can you tell us what it is that you're going to be drawing and what charity this is going to benefit?
I'm going to draw Spider-Man, a book I drew many years ago, and I haven't drawn on paper really to do a sketch like this in many years, so it should be interesting.
Yeah.
Looking
forward to it.
Yeah, cool. And yeah, where the donation will go to the Greater Vancouver Food Bank.
Awesome. That's a great choice. Now, from reading some of your past interviews, it seems comics and films were an obsession of yours from an early age. Can you walk us through what kind of stuff you were consuming as a kid? We kind of want to know the root of your obsession.
Wow, yeah, like for me, growing up, it was 80s Marvel. So in those days, it was, John Byrne, Chris Claremont, Paul Smith, Michael Golden, all those guys from that era. Frank Miller. That was kind of like the early, Marvel books I was getting at the shop were some pretty classic stuff, and so that was sort of part of the media diet early on. And just about every action movie, the '80s films, and just media and TV in general have a big influence on the work I do now. And you could, if you could, you could figure out how they connect to everything I do now. There's lots of little shout outs and everything I write and draw that sort of connects to all that stuff from those days.
So there's a lot of Easter eggs in your work, basically.
I guess they're Easter eggs, sort of. They're probably too impossible to decipher because they're for me. But
has anyone ever found one that you thought would be impossible to figure out that surprised you?
No, not yet. I don't think so. Nothing comes to mind.
You've mentioned previously that drawing was sort of a way for you to stay connected to the films and comics when you weren't watching or reading them. I think that's an interesting perspective. Just how much were you drawing growing up, and when did you realize, okay, this is something that I'm going to do?
I feel like that was pretty early on. I decided that this was for me, and I thought, well, I'm not bad at it now that I'm a kid. I might be able to get in there eventually. I thought maybe before I die, I should be good enough to get to draw a comic or so too, and maybe I'll get in before that. So yeah, it was pretty much my little passion. Still is.
So you're drawing and making your own comics. Now, how does a kid from Canada get hooked up with Marvel, especially back then when you started?
Back and it was all, in a way, it was easier. There was just like, you just had to, well, you had to be, somewhat good, but you would go to, you'd actually go to these places, and you'd wait in line in San Diego to meet editors, and you'd have these little, Xerox packets of your work, or five sample pages with the Marvel characters, and
Mhm.
hopefully that's how I got my job ultimately. Is I met a guy personally there and chatted with him, and then he had a guy drop out of a book he was editing, and he called me up, and hired this Canadian kid for 10 cents.
Now, your first major publication was Ecto Kid in 1993, which is part of the Clive Barker Razorline imprint at Marvel. Now, for the uninitiated, can you tell them about this relic of the 90s?
Relic, I take umbrage, sir. Massive cult following for Ecto Kid. No, I don't. Yeah, it was
for sure.
Oh, I don't think there is at all. I rarely see them.
That's what cult's all about. They're hidden in darkness.
There were some cool books, and they lasted like 9 issues. And the sales that they canceled them out at would be like really decent sales. Now you'd be like, if you had a creator on these sales, then you'd be smiling. But yeah, they're gone. We actually even had a whole crossover planned, and Clyde Barker flew to San Diego. They brought us up to San Diego, and we sat in this room and planned this big crossover that was going to happen over these books. And then a month later, it's all over.
Who were you going to cross over with? Like the Marvel Universe?
Just ourselves within the books. It'd be an event where the 4 Barkerverse character books, which were Ecto Kid, Hokum and Hex, Saint Sinner, and what was the last one? Something.
Hyperkind.
Hyperkind, right? That was the superhero one. So they were going to do that, and just never came to fruition.
Oh, that's a shame. That would have been interesting to see. Were you a Clive Barker fan before getting hooked up with all this?
No, not at all. Since then I have, and so having been a part of his work, I got interested then when I was like 9 or something. But before that, not really. I was a bit wimpy when it came to horror in those days, and so no. But it was still, I still understood he was famous. I had seen the movies, Nightbreed and all that stuff. But I was a kid; it was too weird for me at that age.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was a big Hellraiser fan growing up. Those movies really terrified the hell out of me.
Yeah, I just watched them recently. They're pretty funny. The second one's really funny too, because the guy's kind of like being carried around on his head by his head, like big tentacles putting him around. So
I always thought that Hellbound, the second Hellraiser movie, was always underappreciated.
I don't know. I liked it. I do that a lot of when I'm drawing. A lot of the time, I love putting on old movies like that. A lot of old 80s horror, which some of it I was too scared to watch then, is like a strange comfort now.
I wanted to continue talking about some of your earlier work. Lana Wachowski co-wrote Ecto Kid, and I saw somewhere that Lily was also unofficially involved. There's so much going on here between their involvement and Clive Barker having his own line of books at Marvel. Now it's kind of hard to process. What
Lily was co-writing for sure, but it was like in those days it was just like Marvel. It's just dealing. It just got too complicated because Lana had the relationship, and so whatever. But like I said, it was 9 months, and then it was, the movie. They sold their first scripts and had moved on. But
was that Bound?
No, they had sold a script called Assassins. That was ultimately a movie directed by Richard Donner and directed by Richard Donner and starring Stallone and Antonio Banderas.
Oh, yes, I remember this movie.
I think I forget who the woman who's in it. The female.
Julianne Moore.
Yeah. So that was the first one made, and then they did some script doctoring on some things, and then Bound was the first movie they were able to get made, and then after that, somewhere around in there, they sold Matrix, and then that was this long process of getting that made.
Now, working with the Wachowskis so early in your career, walk us through that experience. Did you know them before the comic book stuff?
No, we were basically like, how you are when you work at the big two is often you're just paired off. You want to draw this, here's your writer, and that's how the relationship began. And then we kind of got to know each other a little bit through going to these events, right?
Hmm.
And we had a good relationship. And then when the main movie stuff happened, they just kind of you know called me up, and they had a very specific idea about what they wanted out of their storyboards and how it was going to be a part of the pitching process of the movie, because in those days, like cyberpunk was pretty fresh
Hmm.
back in the 90s, and so they had to go to basically, old men who ran Warner Brothers in those days, like Terry Semel, and explain these concepts. People were very funny. They would read the scripts and they go, "Well, how do they get from the sewers to the city?" Like, you know, they don't understand the jacking in and jacking out. Just kind of like couldn't quite figure out that how that worked, and so they wanted a bunch of drawings and stuff to show, basically kind of a slideshow what it would be like,
Hmm.
the tone of the film and that stuff.
Yeah, I can't imagine a movie like The Matrix was an easy pitch.
Oh no, yeah, yeah. It didn't even test that great either. That was another big process of people just not. They kind of liked it, and then they kind of bring a guy in who like asks all these questions and makes them, and then they start thinking about it, and they're like, "You're right, I didn't understand this and that. Maybe it's not so good, but it's a hard movie to absorb." But I think emotionally, the audience was really with it, and
Right.
then anyway, it was just a funny. It was one of the things I got to experience. Was that how it was just like very depressing sort of initial reaction with this audience.
When you were storyboarding it initially, you obviously got to see a lot of this world before anyone else did. At the time that you were working on it, before any audience members had a chance to even see a single frame of this movie, did you have a sense of like, holy shit, this is going to be big? Or were you just too close to the project to see it that way?
Yeah, it's funny. No, you don't feel that way because what you experience is like how much of a crapshoot everything is, because you go in,
Right.
you're working on it and you think it's cool, and everyone who working on a movie is working hard, and you're working on your little piece, and you're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be cool,
Hmm.
and uh, but then they go to meetings and then they get rejected, and like I worked on The Matrix for like 7 months over a couple of years. I'd go away, come back, a couple months on, and then you would leave, and every time I left the movie, it looked like it wasn't going to happen.
Hmm.
And then some time would go by, and then they would get a little bit more development money, and they'd be able to get some more office space again, and they'd bring me out, and then they'd hire a couple more artists, and that would go for a couple months, and then that would fall over. And so when it finally got green lit, I hadn't even been working on it for a while. And so you're like, oh wow, that's great, it's going to happen now. But you leave, you kind of never know. I didn't. I'd sort of expected that they would just go and kind of it would get made, but it was a lot of it's a battle up a hill.
Now, since the Wachowskis came from comics and worked with you previously, did you find that they had an appreciation for the storyboard process and conceptual stages more than some other filmmakers might?
Oh yeah, they were a lot of the time storyboards are just they're just meant to be a blueprint for something else. Something to start with, and but they would have really had specific ideas they wanted carried out, and they really wanted the boards to be faithful to those things, and that's what was kind of different about the process, that you can kind of
Hmm.
hold up storyboards and they kind of line up with what you see on screen. In later years, after the Matrix movies, they've gotten a lot looser, I think, and it's pretty cool. They can be a lot. They're so skilled at filmmaking now; they can make a lot of things happen quickly.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Now, a lot of people often say that with comics being adapted to film, that the storyboards are already done. Now, I'm wondering, as someone who has really had success in both of those fields, if you feel that that's similar, or are they quite different? How do you approach each of them?
well, I don't know if a comic book is like it's a few images and moments. Storyboards are more about you kind of draw and draw because you're trying to figure out the coverage or the amount of shots to a scene, or potentially the amount of
Hmm.
shots. Give the directors and producers and other departments an idea of what the scene will cost, how much needs to be cut or added or changed or combined, that kind of thing, revised. Whereas a comic book, it's the book comic itself is the artifact. The art you're doing isn't in service of anything else. It's just the art of the book, and it's similar that you're trying to find great images and stuff, but you have a lot less real estate to work with. So you're trying to, it's really the drawing and the writing are about, capturing those moments, creating those moments that might, play out in a much longer way if you're watching cinema.
Now you're working on Matrix 4 right now. I don't want to be annoying and ask you for plot details or anything like that, but what's it been like to return to that world, especially after having the former films having such a major cultural impact?
Yeah, it was great. I think what's cool about the new one is that, it couldn't have, it's great that it happened so much later, 20 years later than the original one. And I think, as a filmmaker and as a creator, Alana's a lot different, obviously. And so the film has the integrity of the Matrix world is there, and it's as cohesive as it was before, but it opens up in new and different and exciting ways that make a lot of sense and are really, I think, rewarding. And that's what I found about it. And so the script, the movie is, I don't know, I think it's going to be a worthy, a fourth installment that takes you to some fun places, and gets pretty emotional too.
One thing I am really curious about, though, is that once upon a time you worked on the never-made George Miller Justice League film. Now that must have been kind of incredible. And how far did that make it? And can you say how close or how far it was from what ended up being the Snyder version?
Oh yeah, for sure. Completely different than the Snyder version. Absolutely, tonally, and on every level. Quite a bit different. Yeah, that was a great experience. It was one of the first. It was great to got to go to Australia for that, and I love going to Sydney. And I was a huge fan of George Miller, and so that was amazing. The movie was, it wasn't exactly the fans one. It was like, it was George Miller's take, so it had kind of a fun. I'm wondering what people would have made of it. I mean, there were some scenes in it that were like, kind of wacky. There's like a scene where, like, they've all been injured, right? The heroes, you've got Green Lantern, Aquaman, and Martian Manhunter in the Fortress of Solitude, and they're recovering from this, I don't know, some kind of nano attack. They got a lot of nanos in this movie, and so they're recovering, and they're sort of like, stretching, feeling them, getting ready to go back out again, and I forget what happens, but one of Green Lantern creates like creates some music or something. It creates like a boom box or something, and then Green Lantern, Martian Lantern's like, come on, and he creates like a guitar for Martian Manhunter, and then they start playing, and Aquaman, they create some more things, and it just keeps escalating until Green Lantern keeps creating instruments and stuff. So it ends with a gigantic concert starring Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, and Aquaman playing to this green audience with these giant speakers. That was a big thing too. Think of Fury Road, right, with the giant speakers. It was that kind of thing.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Fire guy yet? So that was the one part that made me go, I don't know. But there was some great stuff. There was a great battle that I got to draw with Superman and Wonder Woman, which was epic because he had become mind controlled, and so she had to stop him. And so they have this huge fight that takes them all the way. In this version, she's the flying Wonder Woman, and it's very godlike, And so they fly up the moon and have this big battle on the moon, and just do permanent damage to the surface of the moon, and then come back. And she ties up Superman with the lasso, and he breaks it and causes this atomic explosion, and this giant tidal wave is going to destroy the city. And Green Lantern creates all this architectural kind of what's aqueduct system that reroutes all the water, and there were a lot of really crazy cool things in it that were like kind of fun and funny too. Like, I don't want to say more, but they felt like they had a George Miller vibe, kind of his sense of humor, and I think people would have liked it in the end, actually. But I heard it got expensive, like, because they had to develop all the characters, all their suits, and all in one movie, and it got out of control.
Yeah, I do remember quite a few things from that time that George Miller announced that he was making it. I know that Weta Workshop had built and made all the costumes at one point.
Yeah, I got to see all all the reference and stuff, and it was pretty wild to see like Army Hammer's Batman was ripped right off. The mask looked just like, it was funny because the mask looked just like the Alex Ross version of him. I remember George Miller at our desk, and there's comics everywhere, right? And we're doing this meeting, and he's trying to think about what Batman should look like. They're talking about different versions of Batman, and we're having the meeting. It happens to be at my table. We just stop there, and then suddenly George Miller looks up and goes, "That's it. That's the Batman for this movie." And I was at my table, and I'm thinking, "Wow," because I had a drawing of Batman right there. So I turn around, and he's pointing to. I also had Alex Ross's oversized Christmas Batman book, and he was pointing at that one instead of mine. So anyway, but that Batman kind of looked like the Alex Ross mask, but he almost had like the kind of do-it-yourself. It looks like the Pattinson Batman in a way. It had that kind of armor. Maxwell Lord was the villain, and they had used the that in Kingdom Come, those restaurants, that thing. So in this one, Maxwell Lord kind of is obsessed with the superheroes, and he owns those restaurants. Right?
Oh, okay, interesting.
Restaurants, and they're super popular, but they kind of are degrading to the superheroes. It's sort of just this guy. He's got no trademark on the public figures, so he can just do it. And so the superheroes don't really like it, because you can go and get like a Wonder Woman snack pack, and it's just like her bust. You know what I mean? It's like a bit degrading.
Right.
But he put some kind of nanotech in all the burgers and stuff, so that like they can transform your average citizen into like this autonomous robot that the Justice League, they have to fight, but they can't kill them because there are people in there, right?
Oh man, this sounds like the most batshit crazy.
It was. It felt kind of old. It was like, I don't want to say Alan Moore, but Alan Moore would do that things with his superhero books where like all that goofy stuff in the 50s, it happened, and now 5 years later, there's just like some reality. There's like some cause. There's a lot of cause in the 50s stuff, and then all the effect and reality comes in later, and it kind of had that vibe.
Oh man, that sounds crazy. Now, going back to your comic book work, you worked briefly with Alan Moore on Youngblood before Awesome Comics went belly up. What was that brief experience like? And I know Moore asked you to work on some top 10 stuff, and you passed that up. Is that right?
Yeah, it's true. How dare you bring that up? Biggest mistake here. I didn't know it was going to be a gotcha interview, Noor. Thanks a lot.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sure you've been asked about this before.
No, I haven't actually, but no, it's true. Yeah, we did that, but at that time I thought comics were falling apart, so I ran back to Marvel. But you know what? I think he did like a great. Gene Hott did an amazing version of Top 10 that I don't know. I'm glad he wound up with that. I did do Gambit, but what was good about going back to Marvel is I got to write and draw Wolverine myself, which kind of put me on that path of doing my own thing. So.
Doc Frankenstein is a major work of yours that was done with the Wachowskis as well, but also created with comic book legend Jeff Darrow, who I understand is a close friend of yours. Now, can you talk about how that all went down? That's an interesting room to be in.
I know Darrow, but I could take him or leave him, to be honest with you. I'm just kidding. No, Jeff is a great guy, and we had so much fun working, and that was one of the best parts of working on those movies was we had an office together. And Jeff's a hilarious guy, and there were constant shenanigans. One of the things Jeff used to do all the time is I would there'd be a meeting. You'd have like a few days. You do a bunch of boards, and you go for a meeting and get some notes on them. And so I would do have my all my notes, all my boards, stacked up and ready to go. And I'd go to the bathroom before I hit the meeting. And then while I was in the bathroom, Jeff would come over and he would draw like all these all over my storyboard. Would be getting hit in the face with and all this stuff. And so then I would take my boards and go straight into the meeting, and we'd be sitting there going through the boards, and then suddenly I had that. And then we would have these graphic drawings. These drawings with all this. They were in pencil, right? So they came right off, but that was funny. We did that a lot. And here's the follow-up to that story is a few years later, I worked on another film in Vancouver, totally different people. And I was sort of hitting it off with this guy, another artist. And so I did the same joke to him. Big mistake.
Right.
Like it. It's a big mistake.
Now, speaking of going back to sort of the Doc Frankenstein stuff, the book is kind of amazing, yet it seems to be a bit under the radar considering the talent involved. Do you have any thoughts on why that could be?
Well, we published it themselves. They used a guy they knew to put it out. And I mean, you need to listen if you want to really make it in comics. You have to come out. You have to come out on time. You can't just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Retailers, they take a little slice of their budget off and devote that to you. And if you don't show up the following month or whatever, or never, then it's kind of burn on them. So yeah, we weren't great at the publishing part of it, but I think the book is good. So it made it out there, but I think maybe it was just meant to be a, kind of let's say a boutique vintage.
Right. Did you guys come up with the idea while you were working on The Matrix as well, or?
Hero had that idea years ago, and when we were in our office together chatting, he would talk about it. He'd tell me about the characters and whatnot, and so I said, Jeff, would you mind if I made this into a comic? Because he kept saying he'd never get around to it. He just wanted to do the cowboy, and he said, yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, but I don't really want to be involved in it. Here are my ideas, but you can, just show me whatever you got. But he was very open about, he didn't want. He was very good about creative freedom, not wanting to, steer the ship or whatever. And then after that, a couple years, some time passed. I did a few pages, and then the Wachowskis heard about it, and they wanted to be involved, and it came out of that. And they had a much better take at that point. They had a good take on Frankenstein, and we did that story.
Oh, that's awesome. Now the book is also quite blasphemous in the origin of Jesus that you offer. I love that aspect of it. It's sort of subversive, transgressive stuff is a big part of your work in general. Now, why does that appeal to you as a storyteller?
I think that it's fun to poke holes into the things that we find we put reverence in. I think that as an artist, it's fun to do that because there's truth in that, and if these things do have any real merit, they should be able to hold up with a little bit of criticism here and there, considering how many people organize their lives around the religion and their faith and whatever. And so I think things like that should constantly are open to being discussed through art. And that's just the stuff that interests me, and I like a blasphemous, satirical take on these things because, it's also really hilarious.
Now, you were doing some Marvel work at the time as well as Doc Frankenstein, but it seems like most of your time during that period was spent on storyboards from our research. Now, was We Stand on Guard your first comic back, or were you working on other stuff in between?
Yeah, We Stand on Guard was my first comic back, and I kind of stayed in comics since then, except for the little detour last year with the Matrix fourth film. But I kind of like comics the most and want to spend my time doing that. So that's what I'm trying to focus on.
Was that a project that Brian K. Vaughan came to you with, or was it something that you guys were kind of developing together?
Well, it was funny, I was in LA and I was at this early screening of Jupiter Ascending, and he was there. He was invited because they know him and they like his work. So they invited him, and he happened to be the other comic book guy there. So we started chatting, and then he kind of at the end of the conversation said, "Well, if you ever want to do work, here's give me a call." And then I kind of just, he tried to leave, and I just kind of dove at his foot and brushed the floor. And then a few months later, I finished all the movie stuff I was doing, and he was kind of doing the same thing. He was kind of in the same process of finishing out on this TV show. He was really tired and burnt out on that, and was dying to do more comics, right? And because it was before a lot of stuff. I think Panel Syndicate hadn't started yet either, and so it was right before he was going to do all that stuff. He had just finished doing the TV show The Dome, I think, something like that.
Now, I'm sure you're sick to death about talking about X-Man, but my co-producer on the show recently wrote Age of X-Man, and so he's making me ask this. When you designed the character, did you ever imagine that a Cable clone would have such a lasting legacy to the point where one day he would have his own event named after him?
Well, you know what? It doesn't surprise me because over at Marvel they use the whole buffalo. You know what I mean? They don't let anything go to waste. Eventually, we're going to see the with the coming of the Dupe gets the Infinity Stones or something, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
why not X-Man? I remember his big thing was that he was super powerful, and that was the thing that people always mentioned to me when I was at a con. Is that everyone was really into how strong he was, how he could just beat anybody in the Marvel. And they said, do you think he could destroy the Hulk? And then people would argue at my table about, of course, his telekinesis is second to none. And
Right.
so people like for the longest time. I always had so many people telling me how much they liked that character in that series, and I think to this day it's still the most highest unit selling thing I've worked on.
You've been pretty fortunate, it seems, to work with talented writers in your career. Is there anything that you learned from them that you brought to your own work?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think absolutely. Like working on movies and just the sort of questions that you have to ask when you're working on movies are a lot of like world building questions, and
Hmm.
what's this like? What's that going to be like? What's this setting going to be like? What's the tone? And so that kind of just goes into, it's just another component, as well as, trying to figure out what you like and don't like and what you want to see and what might be different enough to that you can bring your own spin to it. So, so yeah, they're all influences definitely. On those Alan Moore scripts that were so detailed and descriptive, you could really figure it out. You could do a lot with a page, if you wanted to.
Hmm.
Comics now, I hate the overly compressed, where you feel like you're getting 5 minutes of a TV show. I don't know if they hold uh, as well to like some of those really, you know, sure they're dated in their dialogue and stuff like that, but there's just a way more much action and story beats in the kind of the older stuff.
Now, Maestros was your first fully solo creator-owned book. What made you decide to do this one all on your own?
Well, I just had the idea. I've kind of, over the years working on in movies and stuff. I've always kept a little notebook with ideas with the hopes of returning to comics and doing some creator-owned books. And so hopefully I'll be able to get the chance to get through all those. And my shows is one of them. And my new book, Post Americana, is the next one.
Post Americana is your new limited series from Image Comics that you're writing and drawing. What can you tell us about that?
The story takes place in the long dead ruin of like a futuristic American wasteland. We'll learn that there were multiple events led to the destroyed civilization and that brought Earth's human population down to zero. The
Mhm.
setting now, essentially it's roving gangs and blood cults, are out there terrorizing like little innocent communities of survivors who are sort of like scavenging a living on the corpse of, this dead, super futuristic world, and the ideology of America is kind of, you know, uh, a near distant thing that's gone now, and so
Mhm.
essentially this begins with what you learn is there's this super bunker in Colorado that's essentially this hollowed out mountain that's you know basically a city inside of this hollowed out mountain with the future's most technologically advanced resources, and basically it's a staging area for rebuilding the world, and it was meant for the heads of state and America's best and brightest citizens. In case the end ever came, they could use this place to rebuild. Only what happens when the day the world ends is that the heads of state, the president, none of them make it, and just a few hundred of the elites who bought golden tickets, basically the oligarchs of America, are the only ones who show up there. And rather than using the place for its intended purpose and rebuilding America, they just kind of hide out there for 3 generations and kind of turn it into the world's last gated community. And then one of their own, finally, they get tired of living there, and one of their own kind of rises up and names himself the new president of America, and they're finally going to fire up the industrial 3D printers and take
Nice.
print themselves some drones and take out all these wasteland communities and just pave over it all and um, you know what's the word, sort of till the soil so that something better can grow.
Awesome.
And the story sort of, and then the hero of the story, basically the protagonist, is this wasteland girl named Carolyn, and she's like descended from this collective of survivalists and lawmen who retreated into the mountains when the end times came. And her mother was the leader of this group, and they kept the roads safe for innocent travelers wanting to join their growing commune. And earlier in the story, these Americans wiped them out, and these elite one percenters who have adopted the veneer of the American government have wiped them out, and so she's on a warpath for revenge. And that's the story. Yeah.
So it's a super optimistic tale for young readers.
It is kind of optimistic. The tone of it is, it doesn't end on a sour note. It kind of starts in a darker place, but it's different than a lot of post-apocalyptic stuff in that it's not it's a world that isn't burdened with scarcity. It's wanted to have a bit of a kind of a bit of a fantasy sword and horse feel to it, where it's people are very sparse and not close, and there's large spaces that are uninhabited, and so it's more that kind of world.
Feels like quite the departure from Maestros. Are you someone who enjoys bouncing around between genres?
Maybe I am, but sometimes I don't know. They are like cousins. You know what I mean? Sci-fi and fantasy. I like George Martin has this quote where he says, when they ask how different those two are, he says they're not so different. They're just kind of the same, but the furniture is different.
Right.
But yeah, I like all kinds of different. My media diet is all kinds of different genres and stuff. So definitely love fantasy, post-apocalyptic. I like my superheroes too. I just haven't had an idea for a superhero. That's all. Like in my story, you're going to meet a character called the Night Terror, but really he's kind of inspired by this, and he has a sidekick, this little werewolf boy called Donnie, and he has this battle van called the Carriage of Justice, and yeah, he should be kind of, hopefully people will like him. He's kind of crazy.
I mean, for me, that brings me back to just like 80s stuff. I just love that. Like the fact that you have a werewolf boy named Donnie and has a battle van. I'm in.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, it's certainly got that 80s vibe, but it's kind of trying to be a little kooky. He's kind of got a secret origin in this story, where you find out that he's really kind of a robot, and that
right,
he's actually sort of just kind of this toy of this other rich guy survivor who's kind of like the Elon Musk of my world. Sort of when he went into his bunker, he's kind of, Elon Musk is really into Iron Man, and he likes these, that's what this guy is. It's almost like in Blade Runner, when they go and Pris goes and visits that inventor guy with all the little toys, life-size toys.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that. I remember seeing that as a kid and thinking, that's such a cool idea, but how lame is it that all he makes is like a little sailor guy or a little,
Yeah.
thing. Right. Like, first thing I would do is make a fucking Wolverine robot, or what I was into. And so, like, that's kind of where this idea comes from. And so we meet this inventor is long dead, but his toys have been left behind. And so when he went into his own superhero, there are other characters you'll meet, but the Night Terror and Donnie or Dawn are the two first ones you're going to meet. And they sort of just are these like high-end androids that have been left behind after this guy dies.
Oh, amazing. Oh, looking forward to that for sure. Now, Dave Stewart is one of your frequent collaborators. How do you see the relationship between artist and colorist?
Well, Dave is somebody, I'm so lucky to be able to work with Dave. He's like he just makes your art better. He really is the co-artist on the series. He understands, he understands depth and detail and emotion, and really, he
Hmm.
brings so much to the tone and just kind of helps make the world cohesive, and makes my art look better too. I don't really like my drawings until I see Dave has colored them.
Right. Now, I mean, speaking of your drawings, you work digitally nowadays, from what I understand. When did you make that leap, and how has that impacted your process?
Well, I made that leap because I was doing storyboards for movies and I saw everyone else doing it. And so much of your job when you're working on a movie is revision. It's not
Mm.
like you just scene and that's it. It's like you do a scene and we go, then they try to make it better and they go change this and this. And when you're doing that with paper, that starts to get kind of complicated. And so it's much
Hmm.
easier doing it digitally and much faster. And then I kind of just got hooked. It's funny, when I finished the last bit of second to last issue of Doc Frankenstein, I had started working digitally, and so what I did is I drew it all digitally, then printed it out, and then traced it, and then inked it, and it took forever. And so after that, I just kind of committed. I sold my soul and went all in with the computer.
I mean, I assume that the process is easier now for you. And typically, how long does it take you to draw a page these days versus traditionally?
Well, it's still a couple days, and it still kind of depends on what's on the page. Talking heads are never that long, page a day, but like in this book, when I'm doing, something that's kind of elaborate, that might take 2 or 3 days, but you try to
Hmm.
kind of balance the more challenging ones with, some, more, achievable in a smaller time frame, you just kind of try to figure out what drawings will take the longest. And,
Hmm.
rather than just starting, I kind of draw by scenes rather than just going from page one forward, sometimes I'll just switch and get ahead on some talking scenes or something. So, yeah, but digitally, what it brings to it allows you to kind of make choices, after the ink is down. You can
Hmm.
revise later, and I really like that. And you do not have an original at the end of it, which is kind of the big bummer, but it just kind of, I don't know, it helps me get what I want more quickly. So,
Hmm. You actually said something interesting in another interview. Back in the old days, if I wanted a Jim Lee fix, I'd have to go to my long box, pull out some comics, carefully remove them from their Mylar sleeves. And now you can look at curated artwork on a bunch of apps. Now, I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts on this, and if you think this might change the way that we experience comics.
well, it already has. That kind of evolved out of the idea of, the conversation about the artist, the value of the comic artist in that process at the big two,
Hmm.
uh, and it's just kind of like I do kind of see. Sometimes I feel like the internet it just makes it easier to get that artwork in a way that, like I said, yeah, like I used to. It was my old ritual. Is I would sit down with my books and my long boxes. You'd sit there and you'd go through that shit, and you'd have your bag on the one side of the chair, then you'd have your stack, and then you've got your book that you're looking at. And now it's just, I just go into. It's a rarity that I mean, I still do that, but like, if I'm working, I mostly, you just look
Hmm.
at it and it's all right there on the net all the time.
Now,
You gotta,
a lot of the work that you've been doing recently has been independent and through Image Comics. Do you have any desire to do anything for any of the big two again? Have they approached you in the past to come back, or is it just
a
not
couple
something
times
that you're?
offers to pitch things, but I'm happy. Ultimately, in comics, doing your own thing, I think you can't beat that. Working for the big two, that's not bad either. I definitely have a couple stories in my head that I could definitely conjure up if the timing was right and all that. But yeah, right now I guess I'll just be reading them. But we'll see. But I do like. But yeah, I do occasionally. I'll do covers, alternate variants for Marvel or DC when they call. I always like doing that because it's just I get to pop in for a day and draw like the Hulk or Thor or somebody, and that's always a nice palate cleanser because it's a little different because you know what those characters are supposed to look like, or you have your own idea on what you could add to make them a little cooler, sort of like that.
Is there a specific character that if any one of the big two came to you and said, look, we'd like you to do this book, that you would absolutely have to do, that you would drop everything and be like, yep, I'm doing it?
I don't know. It would have to be like I have a Superman story. It would have to be mine, because I wouldn't want to. It's not that I would want to just like be the monthly guy on Superman or something. It would have to be something that I liked myself, and even if I was working with a writer or if I wrote it myself, it would have to be something that I was really interested in, but not like hey, do you want to draw Long Shot? I'd be like, yeah, I'm there.
It's such a random character to pick.
Oh, well, I was just trying to think of, I don't know, everyone's got their favorite character. It's just like, why is that your favorite character? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I just haven't heard anyone ever say, oh yeah, let's just draw a Long Shot. I don't think anyone's ever said that.
You're too snobby, Nor. Long Shot was a good comic.
I'm not saying it wasn't a good comic. I don't mind Long Shot. I'm a kid from the 90s. I read all those books. All right, so Steve, our time has come to an end, and it's time to reveal this awesome artwork that you've been drawing this whole time.
Can I hold that up to the camera?
Yes, please. We will also show it as a separate image as well.
Read 'em and weep.
Oh, that's cool.
So you don't understand? But there's Spider-Man. This is an animated prize.
Now, if you want to own this incredible artwork, check out the auction link in the description below. All the proceeds from the sale of this piece will go towards the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. Steve, thank you so much for being cornered with us today.
Thank you.